Welcome to the first episode of Story Saturday, or Story Day for short. This will be an ongoing series in which we read an ongoing story called Equestria Girl. Wait, what's Equestria? It's a story in which Twilight from the human world goes to a school in which Twilight from the pony world went to last year, and zaniness ensues. This story was written by Bison. Once again, that name sounds familiar because it was written by me. I will be putting out a new chapter every Saturday, and to correspond with it, I will be putting out a dramatic reading every Story Day, because why not? Anyway, let's begin, shall we? Monday, Part 1. The start of a new school year. Her start at a new school. You know, no big deal. It wasn't like Twilight would really miss her old school over this new one, Canterlot High. She had friends, sure, but they weren't really that close. They'd hang out if any of them specifically asked her, or if she asked them for some reason, but they'd never really hang out just to see one another without any real purpose. Twilight did have one good friend at her old school, but he graduated last year, so it didn't really make much of a difference. Her brother had gone straight into the army after finishing his education and was right into officer training. Shining Armour had plans already laid out in front of him for the rest of his life, and had already taken the first step. Or first 20-odd steps, really. Twilight, on the other hand, didn't really know what she wanted to do. That being said, she'd taken the first 5 steps towards a lot of things. She didn't have any particular plans, but the fact that she was a certified genius gave her a lot of options. That was one of the main reasons she was starting at this new school. She had transferred at the beginning of her senior year. This was a very prestigious school and could much better accommodate her special talents, though others would say it more to accommodate her special needs. Twilight had impulses to keep everything under control and wasn't entirely up to snuff with social situations. She had mild OCD and was on the high-functioning spectrum of the autism scale. That was the clinical definition for it, at least. She, however, just called it being a nerd. It didn't really matter, though. Twilight didn't have to speak to anyone here if she didn't want to. Of course she'd have to on some level, but she could handle that easily enough. Twilight's plan was simply to adjust to a new school, find her place, and stay out of everyone else's way. It was the beginning of the year, so being a new girl here wouldn't really draw that much attention. She was wrong. Just walking down the hall, she couldn't help but feel that everyone was looking at her. Twilight was constantly having moments of awkwardness, where someone would look at her and she'd look back at them, only for the other person to quickly turn away. It was even worse when they didn't look away, and both of them just continued staring at one another. It was eerie, to say the least. She even swore she heard her name a few times, but that was probably just her imagination. No one here could even know her name. How could they? Twilight just pushed those thoughts to the back of her mind as she walked down the halls, eventually finding her locker. Block M, Locker 6. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an oddly ornate key. Whoever had had this locker last year had done some customization to it. The key was standard, but the hilt of it had a red and orange sun and was actually kind of painful to hold and turn. The flares of the sun were quite sharp. After daintily opening her locker with a few fingers rather than the whole palm to avoid being stabbed by it, Twilight opened the door. It was empty, as expected, except for a few photos on the inside of the door. They were of 5 girls and had pins with little red strings linking them to each other, almost like a conspiracy theorist's board. It was actually kind of creepy. Even creepier than the look she'd been getting. The creepiest was the 6th photo that had been half ripped off, but what was left of it made Twilight think that a red X had been drawn through whoever had been in that photo. Oh god, my locker belonged to a serial killer last year. Twilight barely said aloud to herself before looking around to see if anyone else had heard her. A lot of people looked away as she turned, but none of them had been close enough to hear her. This is all kinds of messed up, she said as she covered the inside of her locker from view and removed the strings from the pictures. The pictures themselves, however, appeared to be glued to the door. She tried to claw them off for a few seconds, before quickly giving up. Instead, she just sighed and decided to go with it. The locker was vacant, and whoever owned it last was no longer here, so she had nothing to worry about. Calming herself with that thought, she took off her backpack and unloaded her books into the locker. Today was just an orientation day, and she didn't really need any of them till tomorrow. So for the rest of the day, she just had to walk around, find where her classes were, and head to the main assembly towards the end of the day. Twilight closed her locker, put the key in her pocket, and poked her hand in the process. She'd also have to replace that stupid, pointy key. First on her list of classrooms to find English. Advanced English, focusing on literature and aesthetics. Remember, genius. It was the closest to her locker. Maybe. She wasn't quite sure about the layout of this map.
They're not to scale! How do they expect anyone to use a map that's not to scale? Nice.
Twilight questions as she walked past the library that was represented by a square the size of a thumbnail, next to a pathway that, by comparison, should have been approximately 3 miles long. The thought didn't occur to her, however, not to walk while trying to read a map, as she bumped into a younger pink-haired girl in a jacket that had to cost in the 4 digits. "Watch where you're going," the girl said, but paused as she looked up from her phone, which ironically she'd been looking at and not paying much attention to see who'd bumped into her. "Oh, sorry, princess. Let's get, Sil," she said as she grabbed her grey-haired friend and quickly ran off. Naturally, this left Twilight with more questions than answers. Like, what kind of insult is princess? And what's a Sil, and why does she have to get one? And why the hell is everyone still staring at her? This is seriously getting creepy. It was at that point that Twilight started looking for hidden cameras. That would explain everything. But of course she couldn't find any. They just must be really well hidden is all. "Okay," she muttered under her breath. "You're just being paranoid. No school, you're scared, and you're talking to yourself like this is completely normal." Twilight took a deep breath and let out a sigh before continuing to find her first classroom. No one was staring at her, it was just her imagination. But as much as she kept telling herself that, she was starting to freak out. She started moving faster through the halls, not really knowing where she was going, and probably past her class already. Up ahead, the hall split in 2 directions. To the right, the hall was lined with students, but to the left there weren't any. Naturally, Twilight took the left to get the hell away from these people. They were still staring at her. Twilight even noticed one girl do a double take from the other side of the hall before she finally rounded the corner. It was a dead end, just a few lockers on either side of the wall. Perfect. Even if she was boxed in, at least she wasn't in the middle of a path, having people constantly walking right next to her, staring right at her face. She leaned against one of the lockers, facing away from the flow. If they couldn't see her, maybe they'd stop looking. Oh, who is she kidding? No one was looking at her. She could calm down and just... Twilight Sparkle? Please just be someone from my old school. Twilight scrunched her eyes and begged every god in existence before reopening them. Trying to calm herself, she turned around to face... someone she didn't know. A yellow girl with orange and red hair. Hey, how are you?" she asked, trying to act casual. "It is you! What are you doing back here?" the girl asked. The portal wouldn't have opened again for another 2.5 years after it closed last time, but it had only been a few months. This girl took a few more steps, holding a single book in her hand, but stopped as she noticed Twilight was stepping backwards. "I just wanted to get away from the crowd," Twilight replied. Why did it matter to this chick if she was back here in this corner? Wait, maybe she meant back here as in this school. Did she know Twilight from her last school after all? All of this hurt her brain and scared her totally shitless. Was it too late to transfer back to her old school? The girl took a few more steps forward, slowly though. Now she was standing right next to Twilight, and said quietly, seems it was obvious something wasn't quite right, "Really? But how'd you open—" The redhead was cut off by yet another person who apparently knew her here too. "Twilight!" came a male voice. A lighter yellow guy with blue hair pushed his way through the crowd and into the alley. "I heard you were back, but I had to see it for myself," he said as he walked right up to her. Unlike when that other girl had approached her, Twilight had nowhere further to back up. He just walked right up to Twilight and gave her a gentle peck on the lips. The next thing he would see would be the roof of the nurse's office as Twilight grabbed the book the strange girl had been holding and slammed him in the side of the head with it. He clunked against the locker before sliding down them. The girl was just slack-jawed at what she'd just seen, but before the guy had even hit the floor, Twilight was gone. Everyone was looking at her, and she wasn't imagining it this time. Not that she had been before, it turned out. She sprinted through the hallway, trying to get away from those two who had pinned her into a corner, and... Oh God, what were they about to do to her? Running through the halls, tears started to fall from her eyes as she thought about what could have happened. Up ahead was a safe spot. Well, safe-ish. She wouldn't feel safe anywhere, but the girls' bathroom was as good as she could get. She bashed through the door and rushed into the second stall, locking it behind her. Twilight pulled her feet up into the seat and wrapped her arms around her legs and continued to cry. She just had her first kiss stolen. End of chapter 1. That got pretty dark, didn't it? Like, implied rape and waifu stealing. And not the good kind of waifu stealing. But it'll get past that, I swear. It's a light-hearted comedy that needs to start up with a bit of drama. I mean, think about it. Twilight just slammed Brad in the face with a textbook. Don't we all want to do that? She's living the dream, whether she knows it or not. Anyway, that was chapter 1 of Equestria Girl. Wait, what's Equestria? Chapter 2 will be out next week, along with another dramatic reading. Hopefully. Maybe. Probably not. And it's time for a horrible impression of Twilight's voice. Oh god! Oh god! Oh!